Hello, everyone. Hopefully, you can hear us and see us. And I do mean hopefully, because this is the first time ever that we're doing one of these on a Windows and ARM device. So if you can't hear us and can't see us, that's going to be a problem. So do let us know in the chat. We'll be starting momentarily. It seems to be working on this end. So fingers crossed.
Let me zoom myself out a little bit since my face is massive.
I'm using the webcam in the Surface Laptop 7, and I'm pretty impressed with it, to be honest. It doesn't look bad at all. I can see I can enable the cool Windows Studio effects here. Oh, yeah, great. Look at that.
Oh, is that like the cartoon
anime
or whatever?
Effects. That's pretty cool.
How's my zoom now? Is it?
That's you could probably do a tiny bit more. Do automatic framing. Not that it needs it. Maybe we'll keep that on. Yeah, you're probably fine there, Dan. Yeah.
I can go more if you want.
No, that's all good. Got eye correction. Okay. Does that look like it's working? Oh, it is. I still don't like the eye correction stuff. I still don't think it's realistic. That one is not. So they've got a new one called teleprompter, and it makes you look like you're drunk.
Yes.
It does not look.
I haven't really looked at it, but yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yeah,
so we'll talk about that.
It's currently on now, and it just looks. Yeah, it doesn't look good at all. All right, we'll leave that off.
Okay. Well, I gotta bring up the.
Could try voice focus. See, does that make any difference? Probably not. I haven't got any background noise. I'll leave that off for this time.
We are number 347.
Yes.
All right.
That's correct.
Okay, I'm now recording.
I am. Oh, sorry. Wait. I am now recording.
3, 2, 1, clap. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 347 for June 20th, 2024. Hey everyone, Deanna Rubino here, joined with Zach Bowden for, a second podcast for June. We're getting better here as we return to normal. Obviously, a really big week here for the Windows ecosystem, so we wouldn't miss it. We are, of course, talking about Copilot Plus PCs, which have officially launched on June 18th. And although there were some hang-ups with getting reviewers' devices, we are starting to build up a nice little collection, including the Asus Vivobook S15. We do have the Laptop 7, Surface Laptop 7, Surface Pro 11, and the Samsung Galaxy Book 4 Edge 16-inch. And so we also have the HP Elite book which is a sister device to the OmniBook. I don't have that personally. I was supposed to get it, but it was delivered to Zachary, but that's okay. They're going to do a really good job on that review. So we do have some feedback on that device as well. So we're going to be mostly just talking about that during this podcast. There are some little bits here, including with Windows, that we may talk about as well, but we're just going to kind of share our initial experiences. I'm in the middle of trying to do a hands-on post for the Pro 11 before I get to review done, hopefully for next week. Same thing with Samsung. But we have been using them quite a bit, doing a lot of testing and all that. So we'll jump into that now, starting with Zach. So Zach actually had the Asus Vivobook S15 in about a week ago. He was actually one of the few people to actually get one. And as far as we know, we're the only website that has done a full review already of that device. There were a few YouTubers, including Dave2D and Matthew Moniz, who did reviews or hands-on reviews of those devices too, both very positive. Dave2D was actually pretty ecstatic about it, which was nice. In fact, I thought it was amazing. His decibel reading for the loudest fans was exactly what yours was, which was 42 decibels, which is such a... The only reason I point that out and mention it is because when doing these tests, like to arrive on exactly 42 decibels is really hard, because there's just so many, like, depending on how close you move that microphone to the device, like, it matters, right? Or even how loud the background noise is in your room matters. So it's just, but, and I just want to say Zach, Bowden here, who doesn't typically do a lot of our laptop reviews, did a really nice one with 4,600 words and went into a lot of detail. So Zach, take it away and share with us, what you think about that device, including, the size and the price of it, how it kind of compares to others, and probably who it's for.
Yeah, so the the Asus was, as Dan mentioned, the first laptop we got in, and then to give some background to that, the reason why Asus was the first and only review you've likely seen this last week is because Asus was the only OEM who decided to send out a device ahead of the launch day, which was June 18. And the reason for that is because Microsoft told OEMs to not send any review hardware until June 18th, because after the Windows recall stuff, Microsoft needed to sort of scramble to get a new day one patch ready that didn't include recall. And so Microsoft didn't want reviewers testing the hardware with recall, which would have been the case had they shipped them a week or so ago. So that's why you haven't seen any reviews really. Asus was the outlier for some reason. Maybe they didn't get the memo, I don't know. But we did get one in, and as Dan mentioned, I did review it. And my TLDR of that review is it's a fantastic laptop. It's a Windows laptop. I mean, if you take a look at it, its design is very Windowsy. It has a number pad on it. It has an off-center trackpad. But it's a lovely laptop. It's $1,300. But for that price, I think you're getting... I think it's a good deal for the price you're paying. So you're getting a 15.6-inch, 16:9 OLED display. Mixed on the display. The display to look at is gorgeous. It's 120 hertz, so it's smooth and it's fantastic. Deep blacks, color contrast is excellent. But there's no touch, and it's 16:9. I despise 16:9 displays. Now, I know not everybody does, and so I'm not knocking it for having a 16:9 display. I'm just letting you know if you're like me and quite sensitive to that. Because to me, 16:9 just feels a little bit too cramped, I guess. So from vertically, it's just a little bit too squashed. I just need a little bit more on the top, just so a web page and stuff look a bit better. But if you're not bothered by that, then this display is fantastic. There is no touch, which I think is a bit of a downside, but it does allow the laptop to be a little bit lighter, and for the actual display itself to be incredibly thin. So the laptop lid here is super thin, which is nice. Coming down to the keyboard and trackpad, fantastic keyboard and trackpad. The typing experience is fantastic. Nice tactile experience. The trackpad isn't haptic, but it's still a lovely large trackpad with a nice satisfying click. And the keyboard itself, surprisingly, given the look of this laptop, if we take a look at it here, it's a very sensible looking laptop, I think is fair to say. But it has an RGB keyboard. So you can just go in and just give it like blazing RGB lights on the keyboard if you want to, which is really nice. That's tied with the Windows dynamic lighting settings. So if you go into the Windows settings app, you can customize that straight through there, which is really nice. But what we really want to talk about here, of course, is what's on the inside. That being the Snapdragon X Elite. This is the first Snapdragon X Elite device we've been able to sort of take home to test outside of Qualcomm's labs or controlled setups. And a lot was riding on this, right? We've been asking for months now. Will these Qualcomm chips really live up to the hype? Is everything Qualcomm been promising actually going to happen? And for the most part, the answer is yes. These chips do live up to the hype. What Qualcomm promised is being delivered here for the most part. We'll get into some of the areas where it's not quite living up to. But for the majority of things, it's a fantastic chip that most people buying them are going to absolutely love. This laptop for $1,300 is a fantastic deal from a performance perspective. You can do pretty much almost everything that you'd want to do on an Intel Core Ultra laptop, whether that be a 7 or a 9. You can edit videos, you can play some games, we'll get to that in a minute. You can basically do any office workflow with no problems. The only issues that you might encounter still are with some apps that aren't natively compiled for ARM and things that require drivers that don't have ARM drivers. So lots of printers still aren't going to work, and I think some apps like Google Drive don't work, some VPNs don't work and whatnot, but a lot of apps do work, and that's sort of the big thing with Prism. The Prism emulation layer has been updated so that more apps should work with it, and they should run at a much better performance level than the old emulation layer and indeed the old Snapdragon chips. Pretty much all of the emulated apps I use on this laptop don't feel emulated, except for one, and that's Premiere Pro, which is actually new to the emulation scene. Up until now, Adobe didn't even let you run it under emulation. But as of right now, they do allow you to run it under emulation, and it does feel emulated. It's a bit slow. It depends what you're editing, of course. If you're editing a very complex project with lots of high resolution, high frame rate video, yeah, you're going to notice it being sort of choppy and laggy. But if you're editing like a simple 1080p 30 frames per second video, you'll probably be fine. And for casual editing, that's more than acceptable. That said, if you're editing 1080p 30 frame video, you're probably going to be better off served using something like Clipchamp, which is a lot simpler and much more performant because it is native to ARM versus Premiere Pro. That said, Adobe has announced that they will be bringing Premiere Pro to the Windows and ARM platform very soon. So Premiere Pro should improve soon. Just right now, it does feel a bit sluggish. But most of the other apps I've tried do not feel that way. Like I use Unigram, I use Skype. We're using Skype right now on the Surface Laptop 7 here. Doesn't really feel emulated. It's working just fine. In fact, we're streaming this from a Windows and ARM Snapdragon X Elite laptop, the Laptop 7, using XSplit, which is also not ARM native. Up until now, this setup, what's happening right now, was not possible on a Windows and ARM device. Snapdragon X is the first chip where this has become feasible on Windows and ARM under emulation. So that's really cool to see. In regards to gaming, that's the other thing I sort of really tried here, because I know a lot of people are curious about gaming on these laptops. It's important to keep in mind that this laptop, the Asus that we're talking about first, has the slowest X Elite chip. Now, that doesn't mean much because we say slowest, but it's only a few percent. It's not that much slower. It can't turbo, and it also has a slower GPU versus the top end X Elite, which we'll get to. I think Dan's got a laptop with the top end GPU, so we'll talk about that shortly. But
let me just clarify that for people, because this is still, I'm trying to disseminate this information, but there are 3 Snapdragon X Elite processors or SKUs. Right. And so which one comes in what device is a little bit of a challenge. Zach's right, where they're all kind of in a ballpark of each other, but there's also pretty clear differences. So they are all 12 core, so that's good. They all have the same amount of cache, which is 42 megabytes, but the the base frequency of them is a little bit different, or max frequency, I should say. So the bottom tier is 3.4 gigahertz, as is the middle tier, both at 3.4 gigahertz. The top tier is 3.8 gigahertz. So it's 400 megahertz faster for the top tier. But there's also a difference on the dual core boost aspect. So the bottom tier has no dual core. So it peaks basically at 3.4 gigahertz for all 12 cores, and that's all you're going to get. The middle tier has the same, but 2 of the 12 can boost to 4 gigahertz, which is a big jump, right, from 3.4 to 4 gigahertz. So that's going to give you a lot of extra power. And then the top tier can boost to 4.2 gigahertz, up from 3.8 gigahertz. So again, you're going to get overall more general power in the top tier Snapdragon X Elite, but you're also going to get much higher, or 200 megahertz faster for the dual core boost. The GPU is the same for the bottom tier and mid tier. It's 3.8 teraflops. But the top tier is 4.6 teraflops, which is above like Xbox One, Series S, or I think the Series S, or at least even the Series X maybe. So it's quite a bit. The tops for the NPU is all the same, as is the memory type and transfer rate. So yeah, there's going to be differences between those. We're seeing mostly 8100s and 7800s. That is the bottom and middle tier. The only 84-100 we've seen so far is the Galaxy Book 4 Edge 16-inch. So it is a little tricky to find those. But the reason why these things exist, because I just want to, I know people are going to be like, oh, it's so confusing. And you're not wrong. But and don't forget, Apple does this technically too, right? They do have various core differences between some of its M processors. That's also not obvious. The reason that this exists is simply because laptop makers demand it. Each one has its pros and cons in terms of pricing, in terms of thermal requirements, TDP power, and what the laptop is going for. If you're designing like a business ultrabook, you don't necessarily need the top tier processor if you're assuming that most people are using information management type services. On that. On the other hand, if you want to be like a more creator and multimedia focused device, obviously the higher tier is better. Then something like a Surface Pro 11, it's just thermally constrained. It's a small tablet type device, right? And sure, they could put fans in it, which they did, but using what it's for, knowing it, the market matters on the processor. Plus, like I said, they want to hit a certain price point for these devices, and that affects the bottom line. Even like Zach mentioned that his Asus doesn't have a touchscreen. And so, but the benefits are it's a thinner device, it's a lighter device, and technically it's a cheaper device, right? So Asus perhaps just wanted to hit that. What's their price tag on that? I think it's $11.99.
$1,300. $1,300.
Oh, 1,300, 1,299. Yeah, so 12. So you really want to hit that 1,299 price point, and maybe you think like, yeah, but what's 1,350 or even $1,400? It actually does matter a lot. So that's the reason why these SKUs exist.
And the big selling point of the Asus specifically is that it is so light. It's only 1.42 kgs, I believe, which for a 15.6-inch laptop is very light. You can maneuver it with one hand with ease, versus things like the Surface Laptop 715, which is quite a bit heavier.
Yeah, they use metal.
I know this is a magnesium alloy. Like it feels nice. It's cold to the touch. It is a premium sort of chassis, but that's the selling point of this one, is that it's super light with a big screen.
Someone's asking, is there a way to tell a difference between the chips before buying? For Samsung, they do specify the model numbers of the CPU. That said, you don't even have a choice. If you're going to get the 14-inch, I believe you're getting the 8100. And if you're going to buy the 16-inch, you're getting the 84100. So you don't have a choice there. I believe Surface Pro 11, you're either getting the 12-core with the OLED display, and that's the 8100, or you're getting the 10-core, which is the Snapdragon X Plus with the regular LCD display, so the more affordable version. So you don't really need to know. There's no like choice there, really. Again, you're either getting the 10-core or the mid-range 12-core. We will be doing something with like, basically these are the fastest Snapdragon laptops available, once we get more data to help answer those questions and stuff. We also put that information in our review, so that'll be the best place to find out. I will say most companies aren't offering multiple SKUs of the Snapdragon X Elite. They offer one, and like that's basically it. So even the HP OmniBook, I believe, is the 78-100, so it's the lower tier. And it's for the OmniBook and EliteBook. There's no higher tier to kind of go to. So in that sense, it's kind of self-explanatory, not too confusing. But I wouldn't get hung up on it too much. If you're buying an OmniBook or an EliteBook, you should be presuming that you're going to use that mostly for business, work, and school data kind of stuff. Not gaming or high-end multimedia. If you want high-end multimedia, a 16-inch 16-inch Samsung Galaxy Book 4 would be your better choice, or the Laptop 7 15-inch, which should be pretty powerful. But we'll go into more of that a little bit later.
Yeah.
Sorry, Zach.
The other thing we should mention as well, while we're talking about the chip, is that there are different TDPs for these chips as well. And the Asus is, I believe, unique in this. Maybe the Samsung has it too, but the Asus is unique in that it has a 45-watt TDP, or up to 45-watt TDP, which is a little bit higher than what you're going to find on most of the Copilot Plus PCs. Most of them are around 23 watts. Am I right, Dan? Or maybe even a bit lower than that, 18 watts?
18 watts. Yeah. Again, this gets to get into how the OEMs want to design this laptop. Like, are they going to put in, I talked about this before, is it no cooling really? So you have no vents on the device, right? A self-sealed tablet. You have passive cooling, which you just have a vented system so the heat can just naturally through convection come out of the device. And then you have active cooling, where you're going to use a fan or fans and or thermal pipes or vapor chamber to help cool the system down. Again, all that adds to cost, could make the device more noisy, could draw more power. And it's important to note TDP actually isn't necessarily a reflection of the power draw of the chip itself. It is technically the specification for which the laptop maker targets cooling for the device. So in other words, a 45 watts Asus laptop doesn't necessarily run at 45 watts all the time. It's just that the cooling system is built to be able to sustain 45 watt usage should it be used. Something like a Surface Pro 11, I believe, is more around 18 watt. That said, it can burst up to, I believe, 35 watts when needed. So it does get a little confusing, but this is why we have so many different laptop styles and designs. It's because OEMs are allowed then to, manipulate this to meet their design expectations and what they envision as that device itself. So yeah, Surface Pro 11 can't, probably won't beat, actually I know it won't beat the Samsung Galaxy Book 16-inch. Different processors, different TDPs. the 16-inch is just, massive compared to it, right? So you're going to have more thermal headroom and ventilation for it. So.
And the higher wattage TDP usually also means slightly less efficiency as well, because if the chip's allowed to run hotter, the fan's obviously spinning faster, and so you get slightly less battery life. And so the battery life on the Asus is still good, but it's not the best we're going to see on these Copilot Plus PCs. I know for a fact, since I have benchmarked the Laptop 7, that the Asus's battery life, which it got around 14 hours and I think 36 minutes or something like that, which is good for a 45-watt laptop. It really a TDP laptop. It really is. 14 hours on in the benchmark test is great. And in general usage, you can get through the day quite easily, and even into the next morning before you feel like you need to plug in again, which is fantastic. Obviously, that's with a sort of office-based workload, not doing anything too crazy. If you're editing video, playing games, that battery life will be significantly shorter. But in general, day-to-day sort of workflows, you can get through the day just fine on this Asus with a 45-watt TDP. So the last thing I wanted to mention, I guess, is real quick gaming, because I know gaming's a sort of hot topic and people are quite curious whether or not these laptops are gaming laptops. The answer to that is a straight up no, they are not gaming laptops. Qualcomm never promised them to be gaming laptops. Qualcomm did show off gaming on them, just as an example of the performance that they are able to achieve, but by no means are these gaming laptops. With that said, I gave it a go anyway, just because I was curious to see how well they would game. I think the TLDR is, and what I came away from my tests is, these are going to be good at playing older games, and going to be sort of best served to those of you who are more casual gamers who only play games every now and then, and not AAA high-end stuff that's only just come out. So if you're playing anything based on DirectX 11, you probably should be fine, unless there's some sort of anti-cheat service in place which doesn't work well with Windows and ARM. That's a whole other issue. But in regards to performance and emulation, most DirectX games from my testing ran relatively well. So by well, I mean 1080p, medium to high, graphic settings hitting above 40-50 FPS. Anything newer than that, like a lot of the DirectX 12 games I ran did run, some of them did run anyway, but they didn't run very well, like Cyberpunk 2077, for example. Doesn't run great. Runs 1080p, low graphic settings, can barely achieve 30 frames per second. It's hovering around 24, 25 frames per second. So you're not going to want to play complex, high-end games like Cyberpunk 2077. I also tried to run Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered from Steam. Does run, and to be fair, it runs okay at medium graphic settings, 1080p, but there's clearly some issues with it. Lots of graphical glitches, textures not loading in, characters' hair being all just fizzy and not looking correct in cutscenes and stuff. So these are not gaming laptops by any means, but they can game in a pinch. So if you wanted to play an older game like GTA 5, for example, which is a game I also tried, GTA 5 runs beautifully. High graphic settings, 1080p, hitting 60, 70 FPS, no problem. And that's a game that, half a decade ago was something people would love to, maybe longer than that now. How was GTA 5? It's like 12 years old, yeah. Maybe 7 years ago, people were like, I wish I could run GTA 5 at 1080p high frames. Now you can, even on these Windows and ARM devices. So it really does depend on the kind of game you're planning to run. If you want to run the latest games like Call of Duty didn't even run for me. I tried to run it, wouldn't have it. The Witcher 3 did run, but not very well. So stuff like that is just, I think you're going to have trouble with. But Counter-Strike works great. Portal works great. A lot of those sort of old, Portal 2 that is, works great. A lot of the older games work with no issues. So keep that in mind. Sorry, go on.
Which are the type of games I would play on an ultra-thin, Ultrabook type device. By the way, Ultrabook technically is an Intel term, so they probably are like getting mad at us. Yeah. But the phrase, I think the distinction is important. An Ultrabook is clearly different than a 14-inch gaming laptop, 15-inch gaming laptop, a workstation laptop. I get people want to have questions about gaming. I also find it infuriating a little bit. We were just talking about the Wall Street Journal ran an article today where they talk about it, and it's let's see, I have what they wrote. The headline is Samsung's new AI laptop struggles to run software, including Fortnite. First of all, it wouldn't be just Samsung's laptop, right? Technically, all these laptops would suffer from this issue. But here's the entire article written by two reporters. Let me summarize it. This is a quote. This is all you need to know. Some Adobe software, as well as popular games, including League of Legends and Fortnite, don't run, basically. That was it. That was the amount of research they did. Now, I know the people listening to this podcast know that Adobe already announced it's coming out with ARM64 versions of all its apps in the coming months. Photoshop and Lightroom are already native and run great. I ran Photoshop Elements 2024. That's my go-to software. It runs beautifully on these devices under emulation. It runs faster under emulation than it seems to be run on my Intel laptop. So, just dropping facts. I don't mind people going like, some Adobe software doesn't work, but Adobe announced it's coming out with those apps soon. Like, I mean, all right, complete the sentence, right? That's the truth. How did two reporters not know this? And then League of Legends and Fortnite, okay, admittedly popular games, but even as one of our writers pointed out, they picked two titles with anti-cheat, one of which is a kernel level anti-cheat. In other words, anti-cheat software is notoriously buggy, has issues, can be resource intensive. People don't like it, but yeah, that hasn't been converted to ARM. But it is weird to be like, I just hate this idea that all people who buy laptops and PCs are also hardcore PC gamers. It's like,
yeah,
we're not. Like some people, I do not play games on my PCs.
Same.
And I run a 4080 with a Core i9 desktop. Like I just don't have time. I use my handhelds. I use my Steam Deck or my Asus, right, for that. But like, let's acknowledge something like, some of these devices, they're just not made for gaming / not everyone games on PCs. That said, I think it's responsible of us to talk about it in our reviews, which Zach went above and beyond, I think, in his review to do that, to give the full picture to people. But let's stop just saying that, like, I mean, do Macs get this treatment?
No, yeah, right, exactly. They don't.
It's like, it's just given that they don't really game, and Shrug don't even mention it in their review. It's like, oh no, they're going to have 14 titles this year. And everybody's like, all right, that's awesome, cool. And like, really? That's okay. But I guarantee you this. These ARM laptops, I bet, run more than 14 games. I can guarantee you that. Yeah. And like, but why talk about that number? I don't know. The whole thing is just infuriating. But Wall Street Journal had to go for what was clearly a hit piece. Like 98% of the other software they don't even mention is running fine, But okay, Sure.
Yeah, like I said, so when it comes to gaming, it will be hit or miss depending on the kind of games you are. Like I said, if you're playing older games, I think you're going to be golden. I think you'll be fine. Like you can run GTA 5 at 1080p, no problem. So I think you'll be good. Like a lot of casual gamers who like to play like Sims, for example, on their laptops. These laptops should handle Sims just fine. So that's the that's the TLDR for the gaming aspect. So these aren't gaming laptops. Don't buy them for gaming. If you want to buy a gaming device, buy something with a dedicated GPU, whether that be an NVIDIA or an AMD thing. Those exist. You can buy those. They're not as energy efficient for sure. Actually, someone's talking about the efficiency. Someone's asking in the chat. So is the X Elite more energy efficient than Apple's M3? To my knowledge, the answer is no, but it's not far behind. It's leaps and bounds ahead of Intel and AMD currently in the laptop space, but it's not up to sort of Apple's level of efficiency yet. But it's not far behind. And I think what's really important to sort of hammer home here is that these chips don't have to be better than Apple's latest offerings. Although in a lot of cases they are. Like in regards to multi-core performance, they definitely are better than the M3. And I believe trading blows with the M3 Pro. Single core, I think the M3 still has it beat ever so slightly. But that's the point. Like it doesn't have to be absolutely better than what Apple has to offer. Trading blows is good enough. The fact that we're actually up here in the same fighting den now, if you will, is an achievement in amongst itself versus before where Snapdragon's XEX Gen 3 was barely much better than a smartphone chip. And so they were a completely different ball game before. Now we're in the same game. Now we're in the same fight with Apple. And that is the achievement here. And so Windows finally has its answer to what Apple's been doing on the Mac side. Even if it's not a slam dunk better than the M3 or the M3 Pro, it is better in some instances, not as good in the other, but we're finally playing in the same den. And that is what is important here. And it's only going to get better as Qualcomm works on Gen 2 and Gen 3 and Gen 4, and Apple works on M4, M5, M6. But they're going to keep leaping at each other. Some generations, maybe Apple will have better multi-core score. Other generations, maybe Qualcomm will. That's fine. That's good. And Intel and AMD are going to catch up as well. They'll have chips that are also fighting in the same game at the same efficiency levels as Apple and Qualcomm. That's the big difference right now between Intel and AMD and what's happening on the ARM side is that the efficiency to performance ratio is quite a bit different. Intel can beat Qualcomm and Apple chips in both single core and multi-core performance.
Yeah.
But you're going to be running at 2-hour battery life to do it. So
Yeah, well, Intel would disagree a little bit, but you're not wrong.
Right.
The efficiency thing still favors Qualcomm. Intel is supposed to be addressing that as the main point of Lunar Lake, but we need to see that. That said, I think it's safe to say Qualcomm still will have the advantage for efficiency, but I wouldn't discount Intel here either. They seemed pretty confident, so we'll see.
Yeah, and like basically all Apple has done is they've made Windows PC ecosystem better because they finally reignited competition and innovation in the silicon space, and so everyone's trying to catch up, and that means we as customers, as end users of these devices, get better products overall. And to be fair, I haven't been blown away by a Windows PC like this ever, I don't think. And now this is the thing Apple users had with the MacBook Air when the M1 Max came out. They had this moment of, my goodness, the performance to power ratio, the efficiency to performance ratio in this laptop is insane. And we're now finally getting that here in the Windows space as well. A thin and light laptop like the Laptop 7, which is able to edit 4K video, do a live stream like we're doing right now, is not something that was really a thing before. The Surface Book 3 was the last time I tried to run this live stream on a Surface. And the Surface Book 3 15-inch, which was a $2,000, $2,500 laptop, couldn't do it. It would thermal throttle. It just couldn't do it. We're running this on the Laptop 7 right now, and it's doing it with no problem, and it's Windows and ARM. So that's sort of where we are now. That's the comparisons we should be making here, and that's really good. So I guess that's my sort of overview of the Asus Vivobook. It's a great laptop. I think for the price, it's a good buy. If you're okay with 16:9 and stuff, I don't think it's the best Copilot Plus PC out there. There are, I think, better ones. And I think we're going to give Dan a chance now to talk about his impressions of some of the devices he has on hand right now. So do you want to start with the Samsung or the Surface Pro, Dan?
I'll start with the Surface Pro.
Sure.
Sorry, I just had to send a message to someone. We're just having a little discussion. So the Surface Pro 11. Oh, man. So so much to say here. I've been following Surface since it first came out. In fact, I have photos still on the launch in New York City. It was like a midnight store launch. Panos Panay was there. I have photos of him as well as photos of him signing people's Surfaces. The guy was a rock star already. And the Surface, it was for, I believe, the Surface RT, because I think that was the first one that came out. And it's been a long journey. Ironically, Surface RT was Windows on ARM. That was one of the first ones. And it ran Windows RT. And that was done by NVIDIA. And so that got discontinued after Surface 2. Although they did later, yeah, that's right. They didn't do an ARM version. I believe they did the Intel Atom Surface 3 at some point, which also had 3G, maybe 4G. I forgot which G it had. So it's been a long journey, and I've been waiting. The Pro line has always been like this iconic design, allowed you to do stuff that no other laptop could technically do. It focused on touch, it focused on pen and inking, and it's been a very slow kind of gestating process. We've had moments, especially in the last few years, where it's gotten really good. Surface Pro X was a really nice attempt for another attempt at Windows on ARM. The chip, though, lagged behind in performance. Again, if your work was information management like mine is, I was fine with the Pro X. I know a couple of people have the Pro X. Zach had it. We have people on our staff who has it. Ben Wilson just bought one and was pleasantly surprised. But it depends on what you use your computer for. I'm not, but it was still very far behind even where Intel was in terms of performance. It's always like 1 or 2 generations behind at a Core i5 level, which isn't terrible, but it's not where people were, where the market was, so understandable. This new device has got so much going on for it. For one, it's got some new colors. They're using platinum blue, which is the color they sent, and it looks absolutely amazing. It's just gorgeous looking. And what's cool is the packaging matches the color of the device.
That's the best change. It's awesome.
They really did a good job on the packaging. Also, shout out, much more environmentally friendly. So they got rid of the shrink wrap plastic. Apple has done this too. Much easier to open, and it's all like recyclable cardboard kind of materials. But it looks really, really cool. So you have the different colors, including Dune, which is turning out to be very popular. Zach doesn't like it, but now Zach at least has come around to the fact that he's in the minority in this position. Yep. So the colors are cool. They're fun to have, especially with, the metal design and all that kind of stuff. They announced a new keyboard, which really caught me by surprise. So the Flex keyboard is what they sent over. Much more expensive. I believe, what, $350, or is it and it's $450 with the pen.
Yeah.
So it's not cheap at all, but it's really, why it caught me surprised. All right. So first of all, it has a haptic touchpad, first of its kind in this kind of device. So built off of Sensel's technology, but Microsoft did their own kind of version of it. Really awesome touchpad. A little smaller than I like. Part of that was due to the sacrifice of the new pen design. So not the pen design itself, but the pen used to fold up behind the keyboard. And so it was like tucked away. Now it's always open and exposed. I personally like this. I'm not a huge pen user, but there's definitely a benefit to having that pen always in front of you within reach versus having to pull apart the keyboard a little bit to get into it. So I thought that was cool. As a result, though, the touchpad is not as large as it could be where they go with the other design. But I'm okay with this trade-off. I think it's smart. Pen first, I think it's important on this kind of device. It has a battery built into it, and that's because it's a wireless Bluetooth keyboard. And so it doesn't add much weight or thickness, although it is heavier, it is thicker. But what this means is you can pull away the keyboard now, and the connector part rolls underneath it to even give you a slight angle, which is more ergonomic for typing. And so it allows you to use the keyboard separated from the surface, which a lot of people have been asking for a long time. There have been third-party keyboards that did this not by choice, but it was because they didn't have the Surface Connect ports to support, so they always had to be Bluetooth. But now you get that as an option, and it works really well because this is running Bluetooth 4. There's like no lag, there's no delay, there's been no issues. You just pull the keyboard away, instantly connects. And I got to tell you, it's pretty cool. A lot of people said, oh, that's going to be great on an airplane where you can just kind of keep the Surface in its regular tent mode, but then put the keyboard in your lap. And you're absolutely right. There's just a lot more flexibility with this keyboard, which is why I imagine why they call it the Flex keyboard. But it's just, I didn't expect to have those innovations. I just wasn't. I was saying I would love to see a haptic touchpad, but they went a little above and beyond here. Now, you don't have to spend that money. If none of that sounds interesting to you, they still have the regular keyboards and they work. Same thing with the, they're still compatible with the Pro 9 and all that kind of stuff. So, you can just buy your regular old charcoal keyboard with nothing on it. Save some money that way. But it's a really good keyboard. I mean, I'm really impressed by it. It's just, and because of it's a little bit thicker and has the battery, they reinforced it, extra reinforcement, and they still kept the travel, which is 1.3 millimeters, I believe. I love typing on it. It's just a really good keyboard, in my opinion. So we haven't even talked about the processor part, but yet let's talk a little bit more. The display. All right, so it doesn't have anti-reflection coating. So I did talk to Pete K from Microsoft this week about this. I was like, what's the deal? Why is it not AR? Even though the Surface Pro 10 for business and Surface Laptop 6 for business do have AR. And there's a key difference between those two devices, or those four devices, I should say, which is I know the Pro 11 could hit up to 900 nits of brightness. Now I have to test that myself, but that is the promise along with HDR support. And the thinking is the display can get so bright that it can basically outperform any reflections and glare. There is truth to that. I wouldn't say it's 100% effective. I still would have preferred AR, but it's a step in the right direction. At least it was a principled answer. And yeah, 900 nits for a display for a PC is rare. Lenovo has one laptop I know that does it. Panasonic Toughbooks can go over 1,000 nits for outdoor usage, right? But most laptops are around the 500 nit. Even the HDR ones, 5 to maybe 600, but usually 500. So they put a really good, very bright OLED display. This is the OLED panel. There are two versions. There is IPS LCD type, and then there's the OLED version. OLED looks incredible. Obviously, you're getting all the benefits there, deep blacks and all that. And you have Dolby Vision, you have Dolby Atmos in there for sound and vision for your color calibration. They put a 12 megapixel front-facing camera into it, which is almost overkill. And they have all the new studio effects that Zach's been talking about. And you can see from the Surface Laptop 7, I think that camera looks fantastic. It even has kind of a cool little bit of a graininess to it, which looks nice.
Yeah.
But they did a really nice job with that. And then I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's really new with it. The design, though, overall is the same as the Pro 9. And I asked about that, because Zach and I are big fans of the Pro X. And if you never handled a Pro X, it's substantially thinner than the Pro 9 and the Pro 11 is. It feels literally like an iPad. Like it's a really cool design. But when I asked about that, the answer, again, principled response here, which I appreciate. They said their customer research on these devices say that people just want the Surface Pro to behave like any other PC with really no compromises, like any other laptop. In other words, they expect robust performance. Whereas if you did in a closed system, super thin for thinness sakes, you would have had to reduce the performance on it. I'm sure it would have been good still, but it just meant that it wouldn't be more comparable to what Surface Laptop 7 could do. And so that's why it's a little bit thicker than Pro X. That's why it has vents on the side, and that's why it has a fan, which you're never going to really hear. I haven't heard that fan. The fan has come on. If you put your ear up to it, you can tell it works. You can't really hear it. It's not like the old days where you just heard a whooshing coming out of the device. Right. And I think the only times you would even hear that fan come on is like when you're doing a Windows update or installing some like really massive software or something like that. But sorry, let's talk about the processor. I mentioned it's got the mid-tier, the 8100 chip in there. And I've done a bunch of benchmarks. It does beat, and I bought a MacBook Pro 14-inch with the M3 and 16 gigs of RAM just to compare it and get benchmarks. I could rely on other benchmarks, but I want to do it myself. I want to get the photos. Just so people, I know Apple fans are, I even got the 16 gig model just because I know people are going to somehow try to argue that performance in the 16 gig model, even on benchmarks, would be better than the 8 gig model, even though there's probably no truth to that. That said, I'm planning on returning the MacBook unless my company wants to expense it for me. Because I was actually shocked by the new MacBook Pro 14. I didn't realize they blacked out the keyboard. I don't mean the keys, but the blacked out the background on it. Yeah. Which is like a throwback to the old design. And people are like, oh, I think it looks great. I was caught me off guard. I was, what the hell is this? And within 3 minutes, it already picked up. The keys were already getting shiny. And someone mentioned that to me later on. They were like, just wait till your keys get shiny. I'm like, dude, right? It happened within like 5 minutes. It's like a gaming laptop. The keys get all kind of gross and stuff. So whatever. It's a nice laptop, though. I mean, I'm not going to discredit, like Apple. It's a really good laptop. It's a nice design. Mac OS is still really nice if you can get used to it. But I ran the benchmarks. And so the M3 MacBook Pro 14-inch outperforms this on single core, but it loses substantially on multi-core. I'll try to get some numbers here because I know I have the numbers in front of me somewhere. Let's see, is this it? Yes, Surface Pro 11. So on MacBook Pro, it got a 3,127 on Geekbench for single core, and versus 2,837 for the Surface Pro single core. So the Surface Pro is 91% as powerful as the MacBook is for single core. That's interesting. I will say though, multi-thread is how most things actually run on software on your computer. That's overall benchmarks use multi-thread because it's going to test the whole CPU. Now, this shouldn't be a surprise. The M3 is an 8-core chip, and the Qualcomm is 12-core. So, and not only is it 12-core, it's 12 performance cores. There are no big little cores, which is what Apple does. And there, the Surface Pro 11 is 20% faster than the MacBook Pro. So, I mean, overall, you're going to have a pretty substantial difference in performance there. That's really good performance for a tablet device. And when I compare it to the Surface Pro 9 5G, it literally doubled the performance using PC Mark. Like they doubled it. Like, so it's a massive change in the way and Qualcomm even pointed this out. Microsoft Edge runs really fast on these devices. Like if you're into web browsing, which most people are, you're gonna be very happy. This browser is so fast and so responsive. It's kind of ridiculous. You throw in the 120 hertz refresh rate. It's been outstanding. I've had no issues running stuff. There are 2 Type-C ports, USB 4. I plugged in my Thunderbolt 3 drive, and it worked without problem. Immediately connected and got my fast transfer rates and everything. I was actually pleasantly surprised by that. I mean, that's what USB 4 is supposed to do, but still nice to just be able to have that experience. Battery life has also been very good. Now, I haven't got numbers on it yet. And so it's not going to compete with Surface Laptop and other laptops because those are bigger devices, have larger batteries. But so far, it's been very good. I've been very impressed with the battery life. I mean, there's just nothing that touches this right now in terms of the flexibility of this device and what it can do. Now, to make it really cool for me, there's the 5G version. I was told that's coming later this summer. It's in regulatory approval stages right now. So now you're going to have what I would argue is definitely the most flexible Windows PC in the market. You get a touchscreen, you get built-in pen support. Not only built-in pen support, you're getting a haptic pen, which is really cool. You're getting a keyboard that can detach from the device and be used remotely, which is wild. It turns into a full tablet. It's a regular laptop. You can get it with 5G. You can get a 12 megapixel front-facing camera. You also have the rear, I think 10 megapixel rear camera. I forgot the stats on it. And the charger's tiny. It's 39 watt. It's really nice. It's a really nice tiny charger that you carry around with you. So, and plus those cool colors. I don't know, man. This is like what I was anticipating is this going to be like the Surface Pro that we've been dreaming of? So far, my answer is yes. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't get better, because of course it can. All this stuff can get better all the time. But I think this is pretty amazing at the moment for what we're expecting. So I don't know, Zach, what do you think of all this stuff?
I think you mentioned battery, and I don't know if you've ran an actual battery test yet, but
not yet.
If this Surface Pro can have good battery, it doesn't have to be amazing, but if it can get good battery life, then we've got the perfect Surface Pro here, because that has I think over the years the biggest issue with the Surface Pro has either been A, it thermal throttles a lot, or B, battery life just isn't great. If we can nail both of those things, then there's nothing else to improve on the Surface Pro. It quite literally is now perfect. The only thing I can see that would improve it is if they make it foldable, which could be the future of Surface Pro. Who knows? But I think we're getting close now to the perfect design, the perfect 2-in-1 Windows PC. I just want them to make it thinner and lighter, which I know isn't possible yet, as you mentioned. But if we could get back to like Surface Pro territory, that would be my dream. That would be the tool
and that'll just come with progress, of course. They're going to do what they can. But at the minute, I don't feel like the Pro 11 feels like a fat device, compared to a laptop at least. Someone asks a weird question, so we'll talk about it. Forget these benchmarks. First of all, no. Benchmarks are important because they are comparative, they are repeatable, and they are consistent. They are very important. If I can tell you definitively that the Pro 11 will outperform a MacBook Pro 14-inch with an M3 processor, that is technically all you really need to know. Now, he asked, has anyone tested real apps on this? I don't know what that means, real apps. So I did mention Photoshop Elements 2024, not optimized for ARM64. It is still x86 native, or x64 if you want to get technical. It ran beautifully. It runs, I think, in my opinion, faster on this device than it does on my Intel devices with a Core Ultra chip in it. I don't know. So most of my other real software is converted to ARM64 already. Spotify, if you go to the store now, is ARM64. Slack just came out in beta in ARM64. Runs beautifully. Oh my God, it is so much better. It runs faster again on this device than the Intel on an Intel laptop. All the browsers are ARM64 compatible now. Chrome, Firefox, Brave, they all run beautifully. I don't know what real apps mean. WinZip, sure. WinZip runs just fine. I don't know. Zach is literally using his laptop 7 on this podcast right now using podcast streaming software. So like, I don't know how much more resource intensive. You can get more resource intensive, don't get me wrong. But streaming a podcast from a thin laptop using emulated software and still running that wonderful camera of his with the studio effects, which are being powered by the NPU. And like, I don't know what other questions you have on here. Do you have specific software in mind that's real software? It's a weird question. Sorry. Like, we can do specifics, but besides like Adobe stuff, I don't know what else people like do on laptops that's going to be an issue here. If you have x64 apps, it most definitely will run on these devices, and it'll run just fine. It's supposed to have, the emulation is supposed to be better performing than Rosetta 2, and what we've seen so far backs that up. The only concern are things that require weird driver support, like peripherals for music or video production that haven't been updated in years, maybe some printers, although even there's a generic printer driver, so you can still just print. You just can't get all the super advanced functions maybe of that printer, but the basics will work. I'm not saying there aren't going to be like little hiccups. Someone pointed out Google Drive its native app doesn't run or doesn't run well, I think, on these devices, but that's on Google. I'm pretty sure they'll fix that. Microsoft would just be like, use our free OneDrive.
That's a great point. I think it's time to stop blaming the device and the chip for that. It's time to start blaming the developers for not getting up out of bed and supporting the devices that their customers are using. That, this was the biggest thing for the longest time. Chrome reviewers would always mark down a Windows and ARM device because Chrome ran poorly on them until now, because it's obviously native ARM64 now. But from the very beginning, I don't see why that was ever the hardware's fault. That should have always been Google's fault. And we're now finally at a point where I think people, now that these laptops are actually, performant and good, we can start blaming the developers for not being on board. They should be on board. And if Google is building an app for Windows that isn't ARM native, that's on them. And you should be emailing them, not emailing the hardware maker. That's my 2 cents anyway. At least that's how I think about it. But yeah, just to add on to the list of apps, as Dan mentioned, I'm using podcasting software here. I'm using XSplit, which is quite a heavy app. It's what's handling the live stream right now. It's handling 2 feeds in from Skype, which is also emulated, and then it's outputting them at 1080p 30 frames to YouTube at a bit rate of around 3,000 kilobits per second. That's all happening under emulation. No frames are dropping. Perfectly fine. It's not lagging in any way. Other apps that I use that are still emulated, Telegram for one, and Unigram, which is sort of 2 of the same thing. They're both still emulated, and they run great. Quite literally can't really tell they're running emulated at this point. So most apps under emulation will now run as if they were native. You might notice maybe 1 or 2 hiccups here and there with scrolling and stuff every so often, but it's a world difference compared to what it was before on older Windows and ARM devices, where running anything that was under emulation would feel like you're running it on an Intel Pentium in some cases, right? That's no longer the case. These feel like they're running almost natively, which is fantastic. Like I said, the only exception there is a Premiere Pro for me. That's the only app which I was running where I could feel it running under emulation, and it wasn't amazing, and rendering times were a lot longer versus on an Intel PC. But that is going to change, as we've talked about. Adobe is bringing Premiere Pro to Windows and ARM very soon. And when that happens, Premiere Pro will run beautifully on these devices, just like any other native Windows on ARM app. So yeah, it really does come down to the kind of apps you use. We're going to keep testing these. Obviously, I'm planning to pretty much daily drive the laptop 7 here as my only computer. I'm going to... Sorry, I've got a notification. Surface has updated its privacy policy, apparently. They notified me for that. Thanks. I'm going to run everything that I run on a desktop on here, and I'm going to see, what breaks it, what it can max out at, and see if it can handle it. Because in an ideal world, it will handle most of this. Again, it won't handle everything. There will be some apps, and as Dan mentioned, some peripherals that simply don't work. My printer, for example, I already know doesn't work on Windows and ARM. It's an older printer, requires a stupid driver that was only ever compiled for 32-bit Windows or whatever. It's ridiculous. So that's not going to work. But newer printers will, and as time progresses, these laptops are only going to get better with the compatibility and stuff. So yeah, if you want to wait 6 months, by all means wait 6 months. In 6 months' time, I think we're going to this will be a much better conversation to have as then, because we'll see even more apps being native and peripherals being updated and stuff. But yeah, I guess we could probably move on to the laptop 7, unless you've got anything else to say about the Pro 11, Dan.
No, outside, I think right now it's been fantastic. Really, they knocked it out of the park, and I see why they were so confident in it. It's the Pro we've been waiting for. Well, for me, it's the 5G. I made sure I told them, like, when you get the 5G version, let me know, because I really want to test that. Because then for me, that is like kind of the perfect PC. So.
Yeah.
Hold on a second.
That's all right. So let's move on to the laptop 7 then. So the laptop 7 is the one that I was more interested in. I've been a huge fan of the Surface laptop line for as long as it's been on the market. The first gen Surface laptop launched in 2017. And it's sort of remained the same up until now. Like the Surface Laptop 1 and the Surface Laptop 6, if you put them side by side, the only real differences you'll notice is maybe slightly different colors. And the trackpad on the Laptop 6 was a bit bigger. And the ports maybe slightly different. Everything else, the design was the same. Performance obviously got better over time, but battery life sort of didn't. They were always around, 10 hours, 9 hours, maybe less than that if you were quite a heavy user of your laptop. They were never great on battery life, and the design, when it launched at first, was a very contemporary, very awesome looking design. But as time progressed, those thick bezels and it just didn't look as modern as it used to back in 2017. So we were well overdue a design refresh. And we finally got it with the Laptop 7. And I must say, I think these are the best looking Surfaces Microsoft has ever made. I love the updated design. And there's a lot of small design changes here compared to the Laptop 6 and 5 and all the way down to the first gen. The first one being that the sides are now completely flat, whereas before they were slightly angled, if you remember. They were a little bit chamfered. I really like this sort of this much flatter side. It's a much more simplistic design, but I think it's really nice looking. If you look underneath as well, the bottom is ever so slightly chamfered as well, which makes it just nice to hold in your hand versus before where it was, I think, flat on the bottom. So very small design changes there. Obviously, the big design changes with the display. On the 13-inch, it's now 13.8 inches, which is up from 13.5. And how they achieved that, of course, is they thinned out the bezels. So the overall footprint of the 13-inch is the same, but the screen is slightly bigger because the bezels are thinner. On the 15-inch, they did it the other way. So it's still a 15-inch display, but the overall footprint is slightly smaller because they thinned out the bezels. So the 15-inch feels more like a 14-inch almost, and the 13-inch still feels like a 13-inch with a slightly larger screen. So that's pretty cool. I think these displays are beautiful. They are IPS still. They're not OLED, which I'm okay with. I'm not too bothered about it not being OLED. They're 120 hertz now, which is a nice touch. I was not expecting Microsoft to add 120 hertz to the Surface laptop line. I thought that would only be reserved for their Pro and the Laptop Studio. But no, they brought 120 hertz here as well, and it's fantastic. It is dynamic 120 hertz, so it will scale between 60 and 120 to save on battery life. And the screens they get quite bright as well. They get up to 600 nits, which I think is the brightest the Surface laptop line has seen yet. And they are HDR compatible, although it's not true HDR to my knowledge. It's like a fake HDR, but it still does HDR, can recognize HDR content and whatnot. So that's really nice to see as well. The overall feel of it, the keyboard, the trackpad, fantastic as well. The typing experience is gorgeous. It feels fantastic to type on. It's so satisfying. The trackpad is haptic now, which is nice, just like on the Surface Laptop Studio 2. So you can adjust the sort of strength of the tapping and stuff, as well as the sensitivity of how lightly or heavily you need to click, which is nice as well. I don't think you could do that on the first gen Surface Laptop Studio. I don't know about the second gen, but the first gen you definitely couldn't. So yeah, and performance wise, this story is going to be about it's going to roughly be the same across all the devices we talk about today. Performance is great. It's beating the M3 in multi-core. Not as much in single core, but it's a close game overall everywhere. What's really nice because I'm testing the 15-inch here, battery life has improved significantly. So there's two important reasons for that. One, of course, the chip is much more efficient now, but two, the 15-inch Surface laptop finally has a bigger battery, and that's notable because up until now, the 15-inch Surface laptop usually shared the exact same battery as the 13-inch. Why they did that? Microsoft, I believe, told me before the reason they did that is because weight. They wanted to keep the 15 inches as light as possible. And so if you actually opened up a 15-inch Surface Laptop 5 or 4, you'd see that there's lots of empty space in there because they didn't use that extra space to fill in more battery. And that always annoyed me a little bit. I just really didn't like that. And so with the Surface Laptop 7, they finally actually used the rest of that space to fill in with battery. And so it has a 66 watt-hour battery versus 54 on the 13.8 inch. Now, I've not benchmarked the 13.8 inch laptop. I've only benchmarked the 15 inch, but it gets fantastic battery life. So in the benchmark test we've done, I actually ran two because the first one was ridiculous. And I'm thinking the benchmark test wasn't working properly that first time. The first benchmark test result I got, I think it lasted 21.5 hours, which was incredible. I was like, this can't be real. Had to run the test again. And yeah, it didn't get that number the second time. The second time it got 18 hours and I think 43 minutes, which is still fantastic. For a Windows laptop, these numbers are unheard of in the benchmark test. Now, I've not really had a chance to properly use the laptop in day-to-day workflows just yet because literally the second I got it, I've just been benchmarking it. And so I'm very confident that this device is going to last me all day. If the Asus can last me all day, the Surface laptop will definitely last me all day. I don't see why it won't. So I am very, very excited about battery life. And this is the big thing about these new Qualcomm devices, and indeed Copilot Plus PCs in general, once Intel and AMD catch up, is that they are supposed to be able to last all day, true all-day battery life. And more importantly, they're supposed to have much more reliable wake and sleep features. So I put this laptop to sleep last night at 98% battery last night. 8 hours later when I woke up, I opened the lid instantly woke, the device was instantly on, and I still had 98% battery remaining. That is not a thing, usually. You would lose 2-3% of battery life overnight. Not the case here. Now, obviously, is still sipping on power there. So 98%, even though it was still saying 90%, maybe it was like 97%, but it was still saying 98% on the taskbar. But the point is, it sips battery life now, whereas Intel and AMD devices, usually you'd put them to sleep, you'd wake them up the next day. Either they've gone into hibernation, so they're now booting through the boot screen, or if they did wake up, it's lost 5% maybe sometimes. Like it slowly drains the battery overnight. So far, based on my testing with the Asus and the Surface Laptop 7, that's not happening. Once it's sleeping, it's only sipping on power, and that's fantastic. So we'll obviously keep testing that to see how they go. But my first impressions of the Surface Laptop 7 are, get this one. This is the one you should get. It's fantastic. I'm in love with it.
Nice. Really good. Some questions. People are asking, are you running your laptop 7 right now plugged in or unplugged? I'm going to go say plugged in.
Yeah, plugged in only because I want to run it at the sort of best performance profile, and I could unplug it if you want. Also, real quick, Dan, your webcam's frozen, so if you want to just refresh that. That's not Windows and ARM's fault. That's Dan's computer. Just so you know. I could unplug it. I don't know what will happen. We'll give it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, yeah. So, by the way, I did the test.
I had unplugged my monitor because this is a weird, it's Dell. Dell has issues with its...
Your camera's still frozen. There you go.
No, it'll come back. It'll come back. Yeah. Don't worry. Give it a sec.
Real quick, by the way, Dan, real quick, by the way, I did try to unplug it, and that was a mistake because it dropped me back down to the lowest performance profile, and the stream did start to lag. It should be fine now, though.
Can't you set... But you can set your performance profile.
No, I can, I know, but... you can, but I need to unplug it before I can do that, and so I'm not going to risk it again.
Got it.
But yeah, it did drop me down, so let's not do that again.
Fair enough. Maybe we'll do that some other time. Anyway, what was I going to say? The laptop 7. I'm glad you're reviewing it. I really like the laptop 7, but ever since I got rid of the Alcantara keyboard part, it's just a little dead to me. So, but I've kind of wanted to try its touchpad and all that kind of stuff because it's haptic now and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it looks like a great device. And yeah, from the numbers kind of coming in, Microsoft isn't holding back on thermal performance for both the Pro 11 and Laptop 7, which is really nice and almost a little unexpected, right? Yeah. Going to Samsung. So Samsung Galaxy Book 4 Edge 16-inch. As I mentioned, this has the top tier 84100 X Elite chip in it. We just reviewed the Surface Samsung Book 4 Pro 16-inch. That's a thicker device because it packs, I believe, a 47 RTX GPU in it with an Intel processor. Obviously, that's a different beast. I think it's a clear distinction. So they have like two 16-inch laptops. One is an Intel one with a 4070 RTX GPU, which is ideal for gaming. It's going to be ideal for video production, doing AI, all that kind of stuff. And this 16-inch is more about light creativity. You also just want a giant, OLED display. You also probably have a Samsung Galaxy phone since it integrates nicely. In fact, if you're looking for an alternative to Apple's ecosystem, Samsung's is the best, right? They're rumored to be announcing new phones in the coming weeks and months, including new flips. They're going to be announcing at some point their new Samsung Ring and all that. Like all that ties into a really nice ecosystem that is very similar to Apple's that no other Windows PC maker can really touch at this point. It's been a great laptop. I think it weighs 3.6 pounds, I want to say, for a 16-inch. So it's really thin. It has two Type-C ports, both USB 4, a Type-A headphone jack, and a micro SD slot. I believe it has a 65-watt charger, which is really small too, actually. It's almost as small as the Surface one, which is kind of interesting. So it might be a GAN charger. I'm not really sure. I haven't used it as much as the Pro 11. This only came in yesterday afternoon, pretty late. But I have set it up and started using it. And so far, it's been outstanding. It looks like it sips battery life. Again, you use it for 20 minutes. It's like it drops down like 1 or 2%. It's just weird, kind of, but you're not seeing anything unusual. It doesn't have Windows Hello facial recognition. That's something Samsung typically doesn't do, is they try to keep their lid super thin for some reason. But they do have a fingerprint reader, which works very well. I should mention, the 16-inch does have a number pad on it, which is a divisive topic for many. I'm on team no number pad, but I know those who rely on number pads absolutely love it, and Zach does too, since it's one of our best performing buyer's guides. So I'm happy for people who love number pads. I don't like them because it shifts the keyboard around, makes things a little off-center. I'll say they did a really nice job, though, with this, where they've limited the off-centeredness to it, so you don't feel like I've had some laptops where it literally feels like you have to shift to the left to start typing, which is weird. I don't get that effect here. The touchpad is a dinner plate. It is absolutely massive. It is not a haptic touchpad, which is a little disappointing. I'm really waiting for Samsung to get on board with that. But it's a fine touchpad. It works very well. But haptic can use less force for the pushing. What's cool about haptic is it's basically configurable. You can adjust things like how much force it takes to press down and click and all this kind of stuff, and the kickback to your needs, which is something you can't do with a mechanical one, obviously. So the front-facing camera looks really good. I forgot this. Oh, it's only like a 2.1 megapixel. It's not a big camera, but Samsung knows camera technology pretty well, so they can do a lot with a little. But it's going to, I think, pale a little bit compared to what Zach has with the Surface laptop, which just looks outstanding. Audio seems really nice on it. It has like kind of cool side vents. I haven't really heard the fan come on for this one either. It did get warm when I was running Windows Update and or installing some software, like some really big apps that are multi-gig in size. But it's kind of cool having such a thin and light. It reminds me of the LG Grams, where it's kind of weird to have such a thin and light laptop, and then you open it and it's just like screen, all screen. And Samsung obviously does amazing displays. And as someone who's getting older and getting more presbyopia, having a 16-inch display is pretty nice to be able to trade off. Movies and stuff look great. I mean, their screens are really kind of cool. Their Samsung software is really nice. It allows you to do a lot of kind of cool configurations. I did run benchmarks I just ran Geekbench on that last night. Let's see if I could compare. All right, so compared to the Pro 11, on single core, they're basically the same, which is actually what we expect. So the Pro 11 is basically 97% as fast as the top tier Galaxy Book 16-inch in performance. And it's 95% as fast on multi-thread. So on multi-thread, the Pro 11 scored 14,398 for multi-thread performance on Geekbench, whereas the Samsung got 15,093. That's a substantial difference, but it's not like night and day difference, right? But I mean, you can't argue that extra 200 megahertz for the boost, that's what that is, right? So you're getting like around, looks like a 5% difference.
I think as
well,
like
I said, they're not.
So you're probably going to see a bigger performance gap in the GPU department there, right? Because this is the top end X Elite, and I believe
it's a really good point.
The teraflop difference between the two, the bottom and middle tier X Elite and the top end X Elite, I think is almost one whole teraflop, isn't it? It's like it's quite significantly more powerful. It's almost, I think, or it's even beating an Xbox Series S on the high end config. So I think if you're interested in gaming and stuff, maybe this is the top end config is the one you want to be looking at, not these bottom configs that we've been looking at today.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Geekbench does have a GPU test, which I'll be running and comparing those two. But yeah, you're right. The GPU should be where we see a bigger difference. Now, the GPU stuff is really interesting because when we talk to Qualcomm about this, they've been pretty honest. They're like, listen, out the door, our main concern with these laptops and designs and this chip is performance of the CPU and efficiency/battery life with that CPU, right? That's what their priority was. The GPU is actually very, very capable, right? 4.6 teraflops is not insignificant for a built-in discrete graphics on this, right? The issue is twofold. One, support for games that basically need to be converted to ARM64. And games are complicated because, as we talked about previously, you don't just build a game from scratch and it's all your own code. You borrow libraries and tools that are already out there in the market and build your game around that, hence the term engine that for a lot of games, right? And there are other anti-cheat systems, right? There's like a lot of components that are off the shelf that software developers will then use. So those parts aren't ARM64 compatible. It makes making the game ARM64 compatible more difficult. That's changing. Some of the game engines are ARM64 and converting to it, but these companies need to either update their games and all that. We already know, was it World of Warcraft, I believe is ARM compatible, ARM64 compatible, and runs really well. There's actually a website that tracks all the games that run on it. It's supposed to be 1,200 games that run on this so far. And I'm sure that's not checking even a lot of the Steam ones. But the potential for the GPU here is huge. But I would place Qualcomm in the same camp as Intel at the moment. So Intel has its Arc graphics, which has been a substantial jump for it as well over Iris Xe. So it's getting double the performance in GPU department, and it's actually pretty well. They can do Forza Horizon at 60 frames per second at full HD now on discrete graphics on the Core Ultra chips, which is pretty amazing. But what I mean is, both these companies are behind AMD and NVIDIA when it comes to just maturity in the market. So Intel, despite all the flack it got, when it launched Arc, go read the press. They were pretty terrible on Intel too, because they had the same issues. Their drivers weren't compatible. They had problems. The performance wasn't there. But the consensus is now that within 11 months, they released dozens and dozens of driver updates and made huge performance things, because Intel knows they need to innovate and improve things to get it up to speed. And they're doing that. They're making progress there with this stuff. So the stuff that carries over from their GPU for desktop, that came first, and then came the discrete graphics in the Core Ultra series, but they're both based on the same architecture, and they both benefit from the same driver development. So that's what Intel is doing, but it knows it has an uphill battle. It's been pretty proud of itself in terms of how much attention it's been giving in terms of those driver updates, which are now pretty much monthly, just like NVIDIA does. Qualcomm is going to do the same thing, they told me. So they're going to come out with an app within the coming weeks, which is going to be like AMD's like Radeon software, where its sole purpose is to kind of manipulate the GPU. They can add features to it, but it will also handle driver updates, which they said they're going to do monthly GPU updates there. And the goal is to obviously improve the GPU, improve the compatibility, improve the performance, and work with game developers and companies and software developers to better optimize the GPU for that. There's no argument that they're coming from behind on that. So it is going to take time for them to do it, but they are doing the work for it. But like I said, out the gate, they wanted strong CPU performance, strong battery efficiency. And as far as we can tell, they did that. For instance, now we have to check these numbers ourselves, but HP says on the OmniBook, and this also goes for the EliteBook as well, when they compare it to the MacBook Pro 14-inch with an M3 chip, not only did it get better performance, so it outperformed on multi-core, just like I just gave those numbers, which is kind of expected, but it outperformed it on battery life. And I'll get you those numbers in a second here as I'm talking. And what's important about that is not only did they like outperform Apple in battery life, but Apple had the battery size advantage. Right. So here's the numbers HP quotes. So they quote their OmniBook X at 14,394 multi-core score for Geekbench 6. Now, if you compare that to what I just said on the Surface Pro 11, I got 14,398 for multi-core. They got 14,394. So not that different in terms of performance, right? Right in that ballpark. And they said the Apple MacBook Pro got 12,000. That was actually slightly higher, I think, than what I got, but still right within that ballpark, right? So 19% higher, about 19, 20% higher, which makes sense. For battery usage, though, they looked at video. So they looked at two things: video playback, so just repeating a video. The OmniBook X got 28 hours and 5 minutes, whereas the versus the EliteBook. Let me scroll down. Okay, Teams. They were just comparing it, to the EliteBook versus the OmniBook. Technically, the EliteBook gets worse battery life than the OmniBook because the EliteBook runs Wolf antivirus software, which takes a hit on performance and battery life, a slight hit, I should say, but that's not surprising. But they're being honest about it, so they gave us the numbers. By the way, the reason HP gives us all this information and data is not be like, take our word for it. It's because they want us to run these tests or repeat them ourselves, ideally. That's why they put it down in writing, give us all the details about how the test was run, right? So I don't have much reason to doubt this, but, we still need to test these things, right? So on the HP, this is the EliteBook, so which technically gets a little bit less battery life. They got 11 hours and 23 minutes of performance for running Microsoft Teams on a 3x3 phone call. Okay. The MacBook Pro with M3 got 9 hours and 45 minutes. So the HP got 1.5 hours of more battery life. That said, the HP only had a 59 watt hour battery, whereas the MacBook has a 70 watt hour battery. So they measure that as 11.6 minutes per watt, whereas the MacBook was 8.5 minutes per watt. I should mention they did not use studio effects during this test because that would have impacted the battery life by using the NPU. So they didn't have those effects on the MacBook, so they did a one-to-one video test, right? Sure. But if you want to be truly honest, it would get worse battery life with the. But still, the point is that it seems clear from that data that Qualcomm's chips are more efficient than Apple's. Now, I should mention that is the 7800 chip, so it is running out a little bit lower. That runs at 18 watt and a little bit lower performance, right? But I think that question that people have with battery life on these devices, they're like, yeah, but Apple, it's like, it's going to be much more. It's like, actually, I think Qualcomm did a really good job here with efficiency. I mean, even if you're being skeptical, you could say they're going to run neck and neck. But if we're going by some of this data that's being reported to us, it looks like it's actually more efficient. And I think that's pretty significant, especially since, like I said, they're running all performance cores with Qualcomm, whereas Apple runs, the big little architecture. Some are performance cores, some are efficiency cores, just like Intel. So I don't know. I think this is all really just interesting stuff. Qualcomm seems to have really kind of pulled it off.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've seen, a lot of people, there seems to be a lot of mixed responses to these reviews and early benchmarks and stuff. Some people are going, oh yeah, this is it. Qualcomm have delivered on what they were promising. Then others are like, oh, Qualcomm's falling short. And I mean, I don't know what those people are talking about. I don't see it.
These people are insane.
It's incredible. I've been enjoying. Here's what I said to Dan, and I'm not going to name any laptops. I'm just going to say this. Snapdragon X makes even mediocre laptops good, Windows laptops good, because there's a lot of mediocre Windows laptops out there, and now they're all good. Now they're all good laptops, and that's what this chip is doing right now. Because I've not been blown away by silicon in the Windows space ever. I don't think. Like, I think maybe the last time I was sort of wowed by silicon improvement was when they went from 8th gen to 10th gen, because if I remember rightly, 10th gen, no, sorry, it was from 7 to 8th gen, because they went from dual core to quad core, and that was essentially free performance boost on pretty much most laptops. And then again from 8 to 10 was when they sort of got a bit better with efficiency. But from 10th gen onwards, not much has been changing there, and I don't even know what's going on the AMD side. So
I mean, I wouldn't completely say that. I would, as someone who uses Intel a lot more, they've made some very big architectural changes, including going to their own big little architecture, which dramatically increased the core count on their chips. So we went from 4 core up to 8 core. That's up true. To way more cores, and that makes a huge difference.
And I say Intel Core Ultra is great. It is those are great chips. Intel Core Ultra. I mean, I was up until 2 weeks ago, I was daily driving an Intel Core Ultra. Well, daily driving. I've been using it in place of my desktop for a little while, because I was getting rid of the desktop to prepare for these Copilot Plus PCs. But in the meantime, I needed something for the podcast, and so I was using the Intel Core Ultra laptop, and that's been great. It has served me very well. But I think these Qualcomm chips are better than those Intel Core Ultra ones. That won't be the case forever. I mean, whatever Intel's got planned for Lunar Lake coming up, that I think is going to, at the very least, trade blows, if not surpass what Qualcomm's doing in a lot of areas. And so that's going to be amazing too. But until there were some issues with Windows still in regards to things like sleep that I don't think are Intel specific issues, but I think they're more Windows architectural issues that appeared to be solved with the ARM architecture, but haven't yet been solved with the Intel architecture, the x86 architecture. So Microsoft needs to get on that and fix that.
Yeah. There's, as we go more and more into this, someone's asking, so do we think the apps devs that are still holding out will now support Windows on ARM? Or will we be in the same old story? This is not the same old story. First of all, Google Chrome came out on Windows on ARM just a couple weeks ago. There was no reason that could have come out 4 years ago. It was just because Google didn't want to do it. And what I mean by that, Chromium was optimized. Microsoft did it. Right? Yeah. It was all done. They just didn't want to do it because they were pushing their Chromebooks, and they didn't see, and to their credit, they probably didn't see a big market share for Windows on ARM, but it's a chicken egg thing, right? A lot of people didn't like Windows on ARM because it didn't have a Chrome browser, and so they didn't use, but we just saw that. Slack was another one too. Slack technically is a cross-platform app, right? It runs on React. And so technically it just runs. It's fine. It ran on Windows and ARM. But I would argue that it ran garbage even on Intel devices because of what it's based on. But they just made an ARM native version and runs beautifully. Like I said, I think for me, it runs faster on this device than it does on my Intel laptops. So there's been so much software that's been coming out. Adobe came out on stage with Microsoft. all our apps are going ARM64 native later this summer. That's their time frame for it. So no, and you look at all the OEMs, right? There's technically something like 22 laptops that are launching with these new Qualcomm chips. And that's the first wave, right? This is wave one. I'm pretty positive we're going to see a second wave before the holiday season. And the CEO of Qualcomm was on stage, and he put up a slide flat out with an all-in-one PC and mini PCs and said, oh, yeah, we're going to those too, right? So they're going to keep expanding. And the reception to these devices, look at what Microsoft did. The consumer surfaces are only ARM devices this time. There is no Intel option. The Intel options are for the business laptops now, which you have to go through separate channels for. That should tell you that Microsoft is extremely confident in this. They redesigned their laptops to be ARM focused. You have Lenovo, they have two devices, the ThinkPad T14, and then they have the new Lenovo Slim 7X. I guarantee they have IFA coming up in September. Lenovo typically has a big showing at IFA. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more coming from them. HP has technically two, the OmniBook and EliteBook. Dell has 5. Dell went from having one miserable ARM device that they didn't tell anyone about over the last 7 years to 5, including the XPS 13. The XPS 13, a laptop that not even AMD can get into. There are no AMD XPS devices, right? Never have been. The closest they came to was a 2-in-1 XPS 15 where they did the GPU with Intel, which was weird. But that actually happened. So there's so much momentum in this stuff right now, and it's such a clear advantage in terms of performance. Like literally, if you see people saying negative stuff here, ask if they're actually running the laptop, because I get a little tired of people who are like, I read on the internet types, and they're very confident in their opinions to share with others about what they know about these devices. I'm not saying like the gaming stuff, like some of that is definitely accurate, but there's a lot more to it. Like the Wall Street Journal pointing out that some of Adobe's apps don't run on these devices. True. Yes. But is it completely truthful? No, because Adobe just announced not even on May 20th that they're going to support their software later this summer. Like you could be skeptical of that. You can have questions, but not mentioning that in your article is just poor journalism, right? So, but I'm very confident that this is it. I think people should be worried about AMD and laptops. I do not understand now the value of AMD. The other thing about these laptops that are coming out is their price. Typically, ARM devices were significantly more expensive, $1,400 and up. But if you look at something like the OmniBook, it's $1,200, $1,199, right? And you're talking about 16 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage, right? They didn't skimp out. These are all minimum 16 gigs, right? The Asus is a 16-inch laptop, and it's $1,299. And we're not even talking about sales yet, not to mention the pre-orders, which they threw in a free TV for you. The Surfaces start at $999, right? Like if you're just looking at, say, the OmniBook, it's a 14-inch laptop with 16 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage with a CPU that's supposed to compete with the M3 chip, right? If you were to go buy a new MacBook Pro 14-inch with M3 at retail, which I did from Apple, it is $1,999. It is a full $800 more expensive, and you don't even get a touchscreen, right? And you're going to have a lighter laptop with the HP. You're going to have as good, if not slightly better performance, and you're going to have better battery life. Now, we still got to test those things, but that's what HP is claiming for $800. Even if you went with a 16-inch Galaxy Book 4 Edge, with its top-tier processor, 16 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte storage, that's, I believe, $1,749. So you're still coming in under $250. Now, technically, the MacBook is on sale by $150 off, but you're still talking $100 advantage, right? So these devices are actually really competitively priced. Still premium. I'm not saying they're cheap, but they're competitively priced for what you're getting. Like they're undercutting a lot of the Intel devices. And it's not this, but it's got 8 gigs of RAM, which is what I spent $2,000 on that MacBook 14 because that was the only one I can get with a 16 gigs, right? They're technically cheaper, but they come out with 8 gigs, which a lot of people give Apple, crap for, which I don't disagree. So I think it's a big difference.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was one of the first things I said about the Surfaces, is that suddenly Surface seems like a great deal, which historically you've not been able to say at that entry level price bracket. To be fair, as you climb and you spec it out more, then Surface does fall back into its old sort of ways of being way more expensive than the competition. But at the entry level price point with the X Plus chips, I think they're very competitive with 16 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. Actually, on that subject, the 256 gig storage thing, I think, is the only sort of weak point there for these sort of entry level ones that are shipping with that storage. I think if you're going to spec anything, 16 gigs of RAM is fine for most people, I think, but I think you should go to 512 minimum, only because these devices do ship with quite a lot of AI models, and they aren't small. Like, you are, I think, eating at least 20 gigs more than you normally would on a PC that doesn't come with these models. And so you're going to notice storage be eaten up, especially once Windows Recall launches and you're, collecting months and months worth of snapshots. That will add up. And so I think
the cool thing is all these devices have upgradable storage.
That's true. They do.
The Pro 11, you literally pop off a door on the back with a little SIM tool.
That's a great point.
It's right there. It's a simple screw.
That's a great point.
So what's cool about this too is even if you were to just buy a configured version with more storage, you're going to pay more for it than were you to just buy your own storage and do it yourself. Now, I realize it's a Saturday afternoon, you got to back up the software and blah, 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 blah. That's all true. That said, it's a really easy task. It'll just take you 90 minutes and you'll be done and you'd save money. But you're right. They should, 256 gigs is on the low end. Like I said, HP ships 1 terabyte, Samsung 1 terabyte. I believe the Lenovo's 1 terabyte. Like, most of them are doing the 1 terabyte, but you're right. I would also say, and I'm going to probably do an article on this, but like, should you go to 32 gig RAMs? Now, unfortunately, some of these devices don't offer that. Samsung doesn't offer 32 gigs, which is weird. But I think they're being conservative right now to see reception. They can always add 32 gig if they want, right? So the question is, should you go to 32 gig? And I'm going to say, in some cases for people, yeah. Now, I'm saying this as the guy who runs 8 gigs, and I'm fine, right? So it's not for me. But the reason is because these chips are now so fast and powerful that you can do more with them, things that you weren't maybe necessarily thinking you might be able to do. And that AI stuff does come into play here too. But like, you can now do workloads on here more like a workstation laptop, in which case 32 gigs might actually benefit you to give you that little more headroom and expansion for future proofing. Because like right now, you buy a Core Ultra, like the non 45 watt chips and stuff, and you're like, okay, there's only so much I can do with this laptop. I'm not going to be doing this heavier workload. But I feel like you could start to do this heavier workload now on these ARM devices. So yeah, maybe now 32 gig might be a consideration if you're looking into these devices, if you think you might be wanting to do that kind of stuff.
What's really frustrating with the Surfaces is that, at least here in the UK, I don't know, it might be different in the US. In the UK, they only have one spec with 32 gigs RAM, and it's the very, very top end spec, which is super expensive. It comes with 1 terabyte SSD storage. I would be happy with 32 gigs and 512, but they don't offer that configuration for like $200 cheaper. I wish they did, because that would be my ideal configuration. And I know in the UK, in the US, they offer a 64 gig RAM option as well in the Microsoft Store, which I believe is exclusive to the United States. I don't know how much that goes for, but if you really wanted to to max out a Surface laptop, you could configure it with 1 terabyte storage, 64 gigs of RAM, and a Snapdragon X Elite, and that would, I think, keep you very happy for years to come. But yeah, I think so the Surface Laptop 7 that I pre-ordered is the 16 gig RAM one, only because I just want to see if it's something you can live with. I do have the 32 gig one into review as well. We'll see which one I end up keeping. But yes, I think that's everything that I've got to say about the Copilot Plus PCs for now. Are there any other things you wanted to mention?
No, well, we can talk about the actual Copilot Plus features, I guess. The co-creator and paints is fun. It's not very good yet. That doesn't bother me tremendously. AI, what's cool about it is a lot of it's going to be updated on the back end and all this kind of stuff. So it'll improve. But if you don't know, with a new paint feature, you can tell it what you want to make a picture of.
Yeah.
You know, like a cat riding on a space shuttle in outer space, flying past Venus. And then you can start to draw it, and then the AI will draw along with you basically to recreate it. But then it has a slider where you tell it how much the AI should AI-fy it. If you put it on 0, it'll just be like a 1-to-1. But the more you move that slider over, the more AI will take over and make it more realistic. This is a feature where I don't think it's amazing right now, but I can definitely see getting better. So I know people are going to critique it right now, which is fine. You know, it's fair. I'd say it's very early for it, but I could see this within the coming months and, you know, years just being like getting really good, because we know that's how AI works on this stuff. And I think it's going to be very helpful for people who want to create, even for work, original slides, or even if you're an ideas person and you have a concept in your head and you like designing stuff, you can literally like do a rough sketch. I think I saw someone do like a sketch of a watch, and then like the AI filled it in and stuff like that. And then you can present those as your concepts, instead of having a concept artist come in and like try to recreate it, make it all pretty. The AI will do it for you. I can see students using this. You know, we could use it on the website for simply creating original lead images when we want to, right? So I feel like this feature, I know Jez is like our games editor. He's like, it's been really kind of crapping on it. But like I said, it's fine. Like it's not amazing right now, but the potential for this is, I think, huge. I think it's a really cool idea, and I'm really looking forward to it improving. Now, if we come back 2 years later and it's still garbage, okay, then I was wrong. But so far, the vector of AI development has not reflected such a thing, right? If anything, if you've been seeing a lot of the new video AI stuff out there, it's I think for some people it's going a little too fast. But I think that's kind of cool. The live captions is neat. You can hit a button now, whatever video and audio is playing on your device, it's going to give you subtitles, which can be very helpful for things. I think that was kind of cool. There's, of course, just a Copilot button and a new Copilot design, which I don't love. I'm going to be in the minority here. I kind of like the slide out panel for Copilot. Now it's just a pop-up window that comes out.
So many people complained about that sidebar, and now Dan is like...
I know. So it's fine. It's fine. I'm not saying they should fix it. I'm just saying I did prefer the slide out panel. But fine. I'll take the loss on this one. But it is a new design. I would recommend immediately setting it to dark mode. So they did at least give dark mode for the new one, so that's kind of cool. But and then the studio effects that you're using are really good, right? Really, so yeah, they gave there's the eye correction gaze, which we knew about, but now they have one that's the teleprompter, which is for when you're reading on the screen. So your eyes are darting back and forth, left to right. It now fixes that, so it doesn't look like you're doing it, which is like, I think that's genius. Like, it's a very specific niche case, but like, why not? It didn't cost me any extra money to get that feature. They do have the new background blurring things, which are like anime type things. Those are okay. Those are kind of neat. They do a lot of smoothing, but it's kind of nice to have. They have the 2 different kinds of background blur: generalized, which is intense, and then they have a portrait blur, which looks more natural, nice. Those studio effects are really, really good. And the best part about using them, of course, is you enable them. It uses the NPU, and you'll see 0 performance degradation. It's going to use all these effects, and it just looks absolutely fantastic. Although, as Zach said, I guess when he unplugged his device, it dropped down. So
yeah, like I said, it's only because I had the performance profile set wrong, so it like under throttled because I can't get to settings quick enough to change it. Next time we do the stream, I'll change it beforehand, and we'll do the stream unplugged, and it should work fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm just sort of going through all the different filters and stuff. I really do like the creative filters. I think they're really cool. They're very subtle, but they are noticeable. They're not like Snapchat. Well, they are like Snapchat filters, but they're not like obnoxious. They're like, if you stuck this on in like a meeting at work, I don't think people would be too upset that you did that. I think you can get away with it. It just sort of smooths out your skin and makes your hair look a little bit more like you gave a crap. which is nice. But yeah, the studio effects are really kind of cool. And of course, the big feature which isn't here yet is Windows Recall. We sort of, I guess, missed this from the last episode, but Microsoft actually ended up delaying Windows Recall. Last time we did the podcast, they had announced that it would be fixed by the time June 18 rolled around. But then after we did that show, they announced that actually they're going to delay Windows Recall. So Windows Recall is coming later. These PCs launched without Windows Recall there. I have had a chance to play with Windows Recall because it was technically enableable on the Pro X and stuff before they decided to pull it. And Windows Recall, in my opinion, is great. It's a cool concept and it worked as intended. Like, it wasn't, I was able to go in there and type Lumia and it would bring up every instance where a Lumia was on screen on my PC over the last 2 or 3 weeks, which is awesome. That's incredible. But yeah, there was a lot of concerns around security in that, so Microsoft have pulled back and they're going to fix it and they're going to relaunch it later this year with better security and hopefully a better marketing campaign that encourages people to actually give it a go, because it is, from the testing that I've done, even on unsupported hardware, it worked really well, and I can't wait to try it on devices that were actually designed for it later this year. But that is a conversation for another time, I guess, because we don't currently have it right now.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it as well. They did screw up royally with that rollout. We talked about that previously, so I don't think that's new. But I think it'll be good for them to they're putting it into the preview program, the insider program, get feedback, adjust things, and just go from there. They probably should have done that first, but they definitely rushed things. So let's not dwell on it. They did wrong. Let's hopefully they get it right now, and it doesn't overshadow the accomplishment of these PCs and these chips. So. With that said, I need to. I can't do really questions right now, but if Zach wants to stick around, he can do that. I need to jump on for another TV thing, but yeah. So Zach, you can take over. I'm going to stop my recording, I guess, and you can take out the outro.
Yeah, you can wrap up the podcast. That's fine. We'll just do Q&A after.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot how that worked. A little. Anyway. It's been a while since we've done these podcasts. That does it for the Windows Central podcast. We'll try to make these a little bit more frequent. We'll be, of course, as our reviews come out for these devices in the coming days and weeks, we'll probably do more podcasts talking about that. We'll also go through and talk about what others have been saying. We didn't even point out Dave 2D, his channel. He was very, I did kind of mention that he was very enthusiastic about the Asus and the Windows on ARM stuff. So, but we want to see what other people are saying in other reviews because, it's important to see what that says. So we'll talk about that on the podcast too in the coming weeks. But as always, you can follow me on Twitter, Daniel_Rubino, Rubino. Also on Threads at the same address. And follow Zach at ZACBOWDEN, also on Threads and Twitter. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you later. Take care, everyone.
Awesome. All right, Dan, if you need to head off, by all means. I'll hang around for a few minutes and answer any questions if there are any.
Later, guys.
See you later. Oh, of course. I totally forgot that that's what was going to happen. So now my camera's frozen, but I can fix it if I just do this. Hang on. Just do that. Will that work? Yes, it did, but now you can see the mess that's to my left. Oh, wait, you can zoom in. Thank you, auto-framing. That fixed it, almost. All right, so yes, if you do have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I will hang around for a few minutes and do my best to answer them. One of the questions, are you hearing whispers if Intel Lunar Lake and AMD Strix Point are going to be competitive against X Elite? I believe that is the expectation, that they will both be competitive with X Elite in regards to performance. Not too sure on efficiency. I think Intel's gunning really hard to sort of get up there with the efficiency side of things, but yeah, they will definitely be more competitive than their current offerings, put it that way. Does X Elite support virtualization? Windows and Optimized does support virtualization, but I think it depends on the app you're using. Yes, it does support nested virtualization. I think. I should double check that. Surely, does Google not have the answer? It definitely supports virtualization. Nested virtualization, I'm not too sure about. But virtualizing anything will require an app that supports Windows and ARM natively, I believe. Which I'm not too sure which ones do right now. I don't think VMware does. I could be wrong, but you have to look into it and find out. Do you think Surface Laptop 8 next year will give the consumer versions the options between ARM and Intel? And number 2, do you think the Surface Laptop Go this fall will go ARM? I think the Snapdragon X Plus would be great. So to answer your first question I think it's too far out for me to know for sure what they're planning for the next gen version. I'm not going to write Intel out completely. I think if Intel are able to bring to market a chip that is competitive with whatever Qualcomm is offering around the time Surface Laptop 8 is coming out, then it will be up for debate it'll be up to Microsoft to whether or not they offer both the Qualcomm and Intel chip or one or the other. It's not unprecedented for Microsoft to offer 2 different flavors of a chip under the same line. They did that with the Pro 9. Did they? Yeah, they did that with the Pro 9. The Pro 9 was Intel and the 5G version was ARM. They did that with the Laptop 3 and Laptop 4. They had an Intel version and an AMD version. I see no reason why they couldn't do a Qualcomm version and an Intel version in the future for the Laptop 8 or Laptop 9. Sorry, yeah, Laptop 8 and Laptop 9. And to answer your second question, will the Laptop Go be ARM? So the problem with it going ARM is the price. Right now, the X Plus and the X Elite are sort of... You're not finding them in devices that are cheaper than $1,000, really. Maybe $900 if you're lucky and you can get a discount somewhere. But these are not mid-range chips by any means. I think Qualcomm needs to come out with an even lower tier chip first that's cheaper, so that OEMs can actually stick it in devices that they can charge $600, $700 for. Because the Laptop Go 3, I think, is $699, I want to say, or $799. And right now, I just don't think there's a chip that Qualcomm makes that can fit into a price bracket that low. Who knows? That might change later this year. I know for a fact that Microsoft intends to offer ARM in pretty much all Surfaces, all of their Surface product lines. That includes the Surface Go and the Laptop Go and the Laptop Studio. But I think it's not just because they want to. It doesn't mean they can based on pricing. The Surface Go is $429, I think, or $449. They need a chip that's able to be put into that device while maintaining that starting price or thereabouts. Maybe they can bump it to $499. So yeah, it really does depend on whether or not Qualcomm or other chip makers, MediaTek and Nvidia and a whole bunch of others are rumored to be joining the market in the next year. And so maybe MediaTek will be the ARM maker that makes a chip for the Surface Go V next. We'll have to wait and see. Is there a significant difference in acoustics in performance mode versus Intel/AMD? It will depend on the device you're using, of course. I can't really make a direct comparison with the hardware I've got because the Laptop 7 is Intel only. ARM only, and the AMD device I've got is also ARM only. There's no Intel options, so I can't make that comparison. But I would say that the ARM devices will probably run cooler, unless you're maxing them out, in which case I don't know what their max temps will be. Zach, you just mentioned price of laptops. There are 3 chip makers now. Do you think that can drive laptop prices downwards? I think it will over time. I don't think that's the priority right now for the 3 chip makers who are just trying to do the best chips they can. But, I mean, Intel already makes, what do they call them now? Intel processors, just generic processors. Which are the low-end stuff, and they're obviously x86. And I don't think Intel will ever make an ARM chip. I think they're always going to be x86. But it's up to them. If Qualcomm comes out with an affordable, very performant, and very efficient chip, because let's be, you can't even make the comparison with Apple because even MacBooks are expensive. Apple makes a $699 MacBook Air now, right? The M1 MacBook Air is technically $700. That's an older chip though, isn't it? So that doesn't really count either. If Qualcomm can make a chip that's very performant and efficient, that is something that you can put in a $600 laptop, then Intel will follow and try to copy that. But one of them has to do it first. Otherwise, they're all going to be playing in the high end. Maybe they will put the Elite in the Surface Pro 11-inch version next year, or there is no news about the 11-inch version. So I really think we should stop thinking that Surfaces are going to be coming on a yearly basis going forward. They could, don't get me wrong, I don't know for sure. These schedules change a lot, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see Surface move to 18-month refresh cycles. And so if the Pro 11 and the Laptop 7 come out in June this year, we won't see another one until early 2026, and that, or maybe late 2024, late 2025. And the reason I say it is because I don't think Qualcomm's expected to have a Gen 2 of anything until middle of next year, maybe towards the end of next year. And so it would make sense to wait for that before they do anything new. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Automatic super resolution. Have you tested this? I gave it. Well, it's automatic. So I only encountered one game where it popped up and said it was working, and that was Witcher 3, and it didn't work really well. From what I could tell, based on the few minutes I tried poking around with it, is that it popped up and it made it so the game would only run at 720p, and it ran with really low settings. I don't know what was going on. I don't know if I was just misconfigured something. I tried to figure out how to break free from it, but it just wouldn't allow me to. So I need to do some more digging around auto super resolution. Intel has made ARM hardware, but that was back in the day of Pocket PCs. Yeah, no, I know. I'm saying they're not going to do it now. I don't think in the year's time or 2 years' time we're going to see Intel announce a chip based on the ARM architecture. Is the ARM Windows OS snappier than its x86 counterpart due to the instruction set? This is not a scientific test, but you could stick an Intel Core Ultra laptop and that Snapdragon X Elite laptop side by side, both running clean installs of Windows, and they'd probably feel the same. Like I can't say the ARM version of Windows is snappier than the x86 version on performant hardware. If you were to compare it with an Intel Celeron laptop, then yeah. But it really, you can't say it. You can't compare whether the OS is snappy or not. I'd say no, they're not. They perform the same on comparable hardware across both architectures. I know Microsoft said that they re-architected Windows from the ground up for these new chips. That's not true. They did not re-architect Windows from the ground up. That's just marketing. They made improvements, and it is true that version 24H2 is the earliest version of Windows that works with Snapdragon X. You cannot install version 23H2, you cannot install Windows 10 or Windows 8 or Windows 7. Those OSs will not run on these Snapdragon X devices, but they did not rebuild Windows from the ground up for it. They've just made further improvements and whatnot to make sure these chips run efficiently and smoothly on Windows 11 24H2. Right. Any more questions? Please feel free to put them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to head off and have dinner because it is now 7 p.m. Will eGPUs and graphics card work with the Surface Pro 11 X Elite? No. So external graphics cards do not work currently with the Snapdragon X devices on the market. However, that could change in the future. I continue to hear that Qualcomm has worked on external GPU support. They have not announced anything. It's not shipping in any product right now, but that could change in the future. Is the ARM Surface Go still possible? Like I said, as far as I'm aware, it is Microsoft's intention to offer all of their Surface products with an ARM chip going forward. And so I think what that means is we won't see a Surface Go until there is an ARM chip that can be put into that device and have it run efficiently and at the price point Surface Go starts at. It's very possible that we might see the two-tier system again where we've got Intel in the entry and then the ARM chips will be the higher end. We'll have to wait and see, I guess. Do you think it's likely that some Copilot Plus PC features will be added to devices like the Laptop Studio 2 with NVIDIA adding driver support? So this is a great question. I don't know. That announcement was very muddled in the language they use. I think AMD or Nvidia, somebody said that they planned to bring Copilot Plus PCs to laptops with certain RTX GPUs. But that doesn't necessarily mean existing laptops, to my knowledge, unless they announced a list of existing laptops, which maybe they did and I missed that. I read it more as future laptops that are yet to be shipping with RTX GPUs that exist on the market today. I could be wrong about that, and they could be planning to backport that to older laptops. If they are planning to do that, I think they're doing that outside of Microsoft's recommendation, perhaps. I don't know, because Microsoft has been very firm that it requires a laptop with an NPU of 40 tops or more and 16 gigs of RAM. And if NVIDIA does that, if NVIDIA somehow enables Copilot Plus features on older laptops that don't have an NPU, or 40 tops or more, then I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work. I mean, I technically, we know it's possible. We know it because the Surface Pro X can run all of the Copilot Plus features just fine. So we'll have to wait and see how that actually ends up appearing in market. I would be surprised, yet also not surprised, if NVIDIA does backport Copilot Plus to existing laptops with RTX GPUs. It would be nice if the Laptop Studio 2 was sold as this AI PC, and it has been given the short end of the stick for sure in that regard. All right, I think I'm going to have to head off. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll be back whenever we're back next. Hopefully we might do one next week, but we'll have to wait and see when we next do a podcast. We're trying to do these every 2 weeks, or perhaps we'll get back to weekly if we can find the time. But there aren't much reviews of the 15-inch Surface laptop as now. Yeah, that's because Microsoft didn't actually give media any review hardware until they launched on June 18. So we've only had them for 2 days. So you likely won't see any proper reviews until next week, which is about right for a fast review like this. I mean, there's not much other than the performance benchmarks and stuff and using them day to day. And once you get the testing of whether or not apps work and stuff and how they perform out the way, which is sort of what I've been doing the last 2 days. This laptop, which is streaming right now, has done nothing but suffer for 2 days as I unboxed it, plugged it in, and began running benchmarks straight away on it. And so it's barely had time to sleep. So I ran 2 benchmark tests. The first one took 21 hours. The second one took 18 hours. It's had a bit of a nightmare. I'm going to give it a good rest tonight, though. So there you are. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. We will be back when we're back. Follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you updated when we go live. But until then, we shall see you next time. Bye-bye.